Hi everyone, it's Naim and Rosinski from the back. Today I'm joined by a special guest, Bruno Garcia. Now, he's not a player, he's not a coach, he's not an analyst. He's somewhat deviates from the usual that we have on the guest that we have on this channel. He is a clinical psychologist. Hi Bruno, how are you doing, man?
I'm fine. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Nain, and share a little bit some insights about esports psychology.
Fantastic. So exactly, Bruno, just go ahead if you could just tell the people watching what you do exactly and who you work with on the esports scene.
Well, my name is Bruno Garcia. I work with esports for, let's say, 4 or 5 years now. And during my career, I had an experience to work with several different esports and teams like Free Fire, PUBG, FIFA, eFootball, card games, and it's like really different types of experience. But I consider myself an FPS specialist because I developed some special methodology of working for brain energy management, communication skills between players. And during like those 5 years, I started working with some university teams like college. And then I was growing up more like in the FPS scene with some like cases that we have in Brazil, some teams in the local competitions like CBCS, that is like the Brazilian championships and all. So among those years, I was like growing up in the scene slowly, like having some special methodology for this part. And then Valorant started. I had the opportunity from the beginning to work with some big players. And well, during this time, we had an opportunity also to be Brazilian champions, grow up in the scene, and to the point that in this year I had the fantastic opportunity to work in this like top championships. But we'll get a little more into this for a moment, I guess. But usually I say that from the beginning of my career, I put my two passions together, like psychology and esports gaming. I play video games since my childhood, so it was a project that I carefully started like those 5 years ago. I tried my best to put a unique methodology of working, bringing some aspects from traditional sports, from working like psychology, performance psychology, behavior psychology, and try to create something unique with the experience that I had during those years.
Fantastic. That sounds exciting as hell. So exactly, I'd like to know, kind of begin with getting to know your specific journey to where you are now. Before we talk about that road that you had with Loud and lifting that trophy in Istanbul, because you are still a part of Loud. And before we get into that, I'd like to ask you some more specific questions about your journey here. So I guess it's safe to say that you've come a long way. So I kind of want to know more about your beginnings. So when was this moment that you decided that I want to do this? I want to be a clinical psychologist working in esports. How did it come to that, basically?
Yeah, it was when I was, let's say I was trying to have a new aspect of the psychology. I was working as a clinical psychologist for a long time, and I also had an experience in psychology in general. I was working with human resources, and by the way, it's really interesting, I mean, because one of the things that I think that it needs to be developed, like on esports, it's exactly this like hiring process, the cultural process, like the vision, the missions of the company, having those well established values is really important. So when I started working with esports, I noticed that, for example, recruitment selection of esports, it's not so well developed like in traditional sports or of course in the business world. And it always sounded kind of weird for me because think when you are making like a hunting process, a recruitment selection process, you are really careful with who are you bringing, the profile of those people that you have in your team. And the players in one esports organization, they like this top part of the iceberg. They are like really show it to the world. They are like the most important part of your organization. And sometimes the CEOs, the people behind, they are not so much carefully of trying to see if the profile between players they fit between each other, how it's like the cultural, the values on the company, the organization that will keep the long-term work. Because in esports, you have unfortunately lots of turnover, and when you have a lot of turnover, like all the time changing players, you lose a championship, let's change the players. Something goes wrong, let's change the players. So in my opinion, you never achieve the next level because you need to always be like practicing and teaching everything new for the new players and the new roast. And it's something that we face, unfortunately, still in the esports. So when I started having this goal to put some of my knowledge that I had in my life with psychology and this passion that I had since from my childhood, that is playing video games. I noticed that I could fit some of those aspects because there was still room for development in psychology. So I started studying lots of, mostly with content outside Brazil, because in Brazil still don't have so many things like published. You don't have so much professional working. Now it's improving. Now we have much more professional, high qualified professionals working in the area. So basically, it was an inner passion. And the opportunity that I saw, that there were some areas to be still developed, and I could help also with some of my expertise and my knowledge and my passion. I think that every person that starts working with esports right now, I would say this word, like, if you have passion and you keep pursuing your route, your goal, eventually, if you deliver passion and you bring something new, you can achieve now good opportunities, because there are opportunities. It's a growing ecosystem. It's a market that is growing up so much in the recent years. So there are opportunities in all areas. Like, I have like now I'm able to work with nutritionists, with doctors. Imagine, like, you have specific medics, doctors working with esports performance. You have physiotherapists. You have a whole ecosystem of professionals entering, and the psychology is really demanded now for this. So I noticed the opportunity in the area, and also I had like the passion, like I told you, that it was inside me, asking to, oh, let's see if we can put performance psychology and esports together, and see how it was crazy from the moment that I started working with like college teams, like in universities and all, and to see that, for example, on CSGO right now, I'm able to work with like legends like Codezera, Taco, some of those guys that they are really important in the scene. So for me, it's really, really a pleasure.
Yeah, you definitely sound like you're totally ecstatic about where you are right now, and it's great to see that people like yourself who are passionate are sitting in esports. So that's fantastic. So having said all that, Bruno, were there any people in particular that when you were starting out that you kind of looked up to, that were working in the field of esports, that were psychologists? Were there any people like that that were kind of inspirations for you?
Well, like I said, it's a new area,
Mm-hmm.
so everything's still developing. And when I started my project in the beginning of 2018, and then I had some opportunities in 2019 already to show my methodology of work, I was mostly checking some psychologists and some neuroscientists that they study performance. I inspired lots of my work and techniques from a guy that he's not necessarily from esports, but I bring lots of like performance techniques from him. That is Andrew Herbman. I don't know if you heard
Mm-hmm.
about him.
Personally, no.
He's make
Yeah.
huh?
Personally, no, I haven't heard of him, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
he. If you check his podcast
Yeah.
and his material, he's a neuroscientist that right now he's bringing lots of new content, like real practice tools that you can use for performance, and also from traditional sports. Some psychologists like Gene Aframo, that he worked with some Olympians
Mm-hmm.
athletes from the United States. And from esports, I was trying to study the case of Mia Stelberg. She's a finance psychologist, and she was working with Astralis in the beginning of 2017. It was a
Mm-hmm.
really important case for the esports scene, and because the guys, they needed the mental training, and they asked for it. So they were really good players, and they were engaged in the process. And then she was able to make a really good job with the guys. And there were some like documentaries, some things telling that story, and it helped in some way all psychologists in the world, because even like Codezera said once in one podcast that in that moment all esports teams, they were looking what was happening in Astralis because it was crazy. The guys were winning everything. They were really stable and consistent. And every team, they started to look at that what they were doing and say, okay, we see that mental training is a really important part of this. And even Astralis was in that time the first team to create what we can call like a esports area of performance. It was called like performance sector, like where you had all the performance like professionals integrated towards making the better version of the players. And I think that her work with Australis was also something that was like spotting and trying to understand what they were doing. And yeah, those was my first inspirations that I was trying to bring for my methodology of working. And of course, I needed to also between mistakes, between right things that I was doing, also trying to develop the experience myself to put together one kind of methodology in a really new area that we have, that it's esports psychology.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Bruno, I think, still, despite all that you've said up to now, still a lot of professionals, in a lot of areas maybe do not consider, esports psychology to be crucial, despite, what you've just said, despite what you've shown yourself, that you were, part of Loud and you've helped them get the final and get the trophy. We'll talk about that later, as you've said. But I feel like, the tendency to pick up people like yourself, to hire people like yourself, is rising in general. So when you actually start working with an individual or a team that is in esports, how do you start out, basically? What do you analyze at first, and what do you try to help them with from the beginning and build up as time goes by? Is there anything in general, or is that totally tailored towards the individual, the esport, or the team?
Well, answering your first question, um, I think that esports psychology is a really demanded area right now.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, it's a new area. That's why it's challenging for some of the psychologists that they are entering, because there is not this clear path of a structure that you need to follow. Because I always say, Naim, that in every type of psychology, clinical psychology, like working, labor psychology, sport psychology, you always have a guidance, like a structure that you will work, and you need to be able to improvise and feel what's happening in that thing or with that person, and have the ability, and the word that is really important, the feeling, to understand how you can help the player in a specific situation. Because in the same time that in psychology you cannot only work by yourself or what you think, because you need to be backed up for some really good theory and science behind, from the techniques that you apply, from the dynamics that you bring into the team, and how you're working with them. You need to have this backup with yourself. You need to have the structure, but you need to be able to improvise in the way that you have the feeling, because sometimes the player will need something specific that only you know about him. So I say that a good psychologist is the psychologist who knows how to put together the scientific studies, performance techniques, the part of the psychoanalysis that you have of the player, the general psychologist, of course, all this mental health part that you need to know about the diagnostics and everything. So this is structure part, and also you have the player that is in front of you. And in order to make like a customized way of working, you need to put those two together, and you, the psychologist, you are this filter that you need to put everything together in a high quality and deliver something personalized, like customize it for that player, because the player is unique. The team is also unique. Is this kind of, let's say, this structure that is based on the five players, that is only there, that five players. There will not be any team in the world that will be that five players. And some conflict that will appear, they will be specific from this, some aspirations, some goals, and you need to be able on the daily basis to read what's happening and to help the guys with a different types of process that you have in an esport. So now asking a thing about the second question that you said, answering, you work with the boys in the structure part. In the part that is structure, I usually work communication skills, setting goals with the team. We talk about optimizing, practicing, like the training, because in my opinion, talking about the psychological process, the learning psychology and everything, still some teams they don't practice in an appropriate way. Like they spam some maps during the day, but they don't have any time to literally analyze the game, to assimilate what they are learning, to have a structure of beginning, middle, and end of daily practice, being able to track their day an appropriate and efficient way, what we did before, what was our goal in the beginning of the day, how we managed it to, for example, we want to put Icebox as one of our main maps in our map pool. So what are our goals here? We want to work today or this week on the city side or in the TR side, like they still say from CSGO, those sides, or what we want to do in which aspect of the game. Okay, let's fix our communication during the after plant. So we specifically aim aspects that we want to improve in the game. We have a way to track. I developed one tool that the player, at the end of the training session, he can put some data, how he was feeling 0 to 10 in some aspects of mental health during the training, about how efficient it was. We also have some part that he can put some comments, and then this tool generates like the let's say the summary, like how it was in general the week of training. We talk to the coaches. So as a psychology, you are also all the time talking to the this part of another professionals around the analysts, the coaches, your IGL all the time. I work really close with my RGLs because you have obviously a huge impact in the team. So it's a collective part of the structured job, and of course then I also make individual work where I also try to understand the personality, how I can help the guys to fix some traits of personality, some communication skills. We also as a team work performance techniques, how you can level up your concentration, manage your anxiety. We also make always before the games we have what we call a pre-match routine that it takes usually between 10 to 15 minutes. We were doing this every single game, for example during the champions, where we make like this part activation of biopsycho social skills, and we always like to get the guys really warming for the cognitive skills that they are going to use, our motivation for the game. So I would say that you work in a lot of process from managing conflicts, communication and setting goals, collective ways, optimizing your training, to performance skills, like helping the guys with their own routine during the days, and also the pre-match routines that we have, and also the aftermath, how we can learn from. It doesn't matter if it will be a victory or a defeat. So it's a lot of process that we work as a psychologist in this required area now that the boys are needy. That is the mental training.
Yeah, so my follow-up question was, how does your job look like from the inside? But you've answered that in a fantastic way. And I think what you've said just demonstrates how much work you have to do, because I think a lot of people, if you tell them the keyword psychologist, it will be like, yeah, like in an office area, the psychologist, he or she just sits there, the player comes in or the players come in, they talk, how we can improve this and that. But from what you're saying, you basically are involved 100% in the process. You are involved in the training schedule as well, how the training goes by, how it's executed, what we can draw from that. So you're basically just involved in the team as much as the coach or the manager. So yeah, that's fantastic to get insight from you about that, how it looks like from the inside. So that's great. So Bruno, now moving on to my next question. You've mentioned that you consider yourself to be kind of this FPS specialist, right? So
Yeah.
you've also mentioned that you've worked in a range of other esports apart from CSGO and Valorant, such as you've mentioned Rocket League, FIFA, eFootball, right? So how does your job differ from working in specifically FPS games and those other esports that you had the chance to work in?
Yeah. Well, definitely they are different, and that's why it's also exciting to work with esports because we are the first professionals to work with this. I I say that we are all the the beginning together because if you think Naim, like 2 decades ago, or you don't need to say 2 decades, you can say 15 years ago, the top championships sometimes they were playing for a prize pool that it would be a mouse pad or something really like amateur, and now we see how it's growing fast. And in the process of growing, we all journalists, psychologists, nutritionists, doctors, we are figuring out the best way to work with esports. And by the way, there is a lab in Warsaw that is really interesting. They make a really amazing job with studying esports. It's one of the fewest labs in the world that they study specifically esports players. I also have some equipment that I try to make some works with the boys studying their brain. I don't do like in a scholar way or for studies, not yet. Maybe in the close future, I can try to publish some papers talking about how the brain works. But it's really interesting because not only not only the difference between esports, but the difference between holes in the game, they differ how the brain is activated and working. So my point is, when you study usually IGL brains, they have such a different pattern of working, the brain areas that they are using the most, different from a guy, let's suppose that he is an Alper on CSGO or he plays as a duelist on Valorant, because all those areas from an Alper, an entry fragger, a duelist, sentinel, or IGL, they have different types of work. So you know that in some of them you need to work more about paying attention in some different parts in the round. With your IGL, you need to work like the priority ranking of each round for him to don't lose the focus between macro and micro management and don't have the impact in his own aim in mechanical skills. So not only between different esports, but depending on the player in, for example, in an FPS or in a MOBA or in another collective esport, he also needs to find the best way to work with the guy. But talking about those another esports, the main difference is when I work with one sport that is individual and one that is collective. For example, if I work with FIFA and I had the pleasure to work with some of the greatest Brazilian players, we were like Sul American Latin champions. I also worked with Bruninho, that was now the world champion of eFootball. And when we were working with, for example, virtual football, I work more performance techniques, resetting techniques, because the main challenge for football, for example, is resetting techniques. When they, for example, they score a goal or they have a goal against them, is the main point of when they lose focus, concentration. So I usually anchor this moment of scoring a goal or having a goal against you when we apply some techniques of like breathing techniques, self-talk techniques, resetting posture techniques for don't allowing them to lose the focus. So I try to study that esports and see the main areas and the main points where they lose concentration, what is the most challenging for them in that area. In Apex, for example, I was working also in big championships, in major in championship of Apex, and you see that is more frenetic, more fast way of thinking. So usually try to work on decision making process and also communication fast skills because they don't have the freeze time. That is another thing they don't have. Is like a game that goes from the beginning to the end without freeze time. So we develop some keywords for calling for strategy, for resetting, even with the game happening. So I would say that is different in the aspect that some of them, when they are collective, you need to focus on the synergy and communication, because communication is the most important part of any FPS. I would say that is the ball of the game, is the most important part. And when it's an individual game, is much more about, I would say, performance techniques that you work with the guys and their specific needs. And I try also to study the game. because I always loved video games, for me it's easier because I studied this also playing this. So I just go and I play and I try to see what parts is usually more challenging, where they can tilt more, and where I can help them to anchor good moments of reset when they need the most. So I try to analyze different roles in each esport. And also between different esports, I try to study each game and help the guys in the more specific areas that they need.
Hmm. All right, wow, this is a lot to take in. But one thing that intrigued me most was, the difference between, the collective versus the individual, like coaching that you have to apply, basically, because yeah, those are totally different. Different disciplines, so to speak, right? But I want to even focus it down a little bit more because, ever since Valorant released, it was like, oh, Valorant is a copy of CSGO. Oh, Valorant is for kids, whatever. Yeah, all those comments coming in. So, it's still somewhere there in the conversations between, Valorant, CSGO, right? So, Bruno, when we met, I remember specifically, I asked you about this, and you explained to me that, some differences between Valorant and CSGO is you notice in Valorant, a lot of stuff can happen very quickly, right? Because of the nature of the agents, right? All those abilities that they have. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that, exploding onto sites, and you try your best to help players who are on the receiving end of that explosion, right? On the defense side, when, let's just say shit hits the fan, right? So what do you
Mhm.
do then? How do you react, right? So basically my question is any one game more demanding, Valorant, CSGO, from a psychological standpoint, or is it just different?
Mhm. Um, it's an interesting question. I would say that all of them they are really similar when it comes about how they demand from your brain because they are really, let's say, inspired one and another. But of course, they have some difference that I can say that in Valorant, um, sometimes it can be a little more challenging to avoid multitasking. And when I say this, I can make some people confused because, well, Bruno, I thought that multitasking is something actually good. But no, multitasking is not good. I can show you several really respected papers saying how multitasking can really damage your brain, how can make you lose your focus, creativity, if we are trying to think and solve several things at once. And you are playing the bomb site A, and then you have like a fake, you have a flash, you have something happening, and then you are trying to micromanagement your guy who's playing on another bomb site, or you are trying to you have a communication that is really flooded, that you have a lot of pollution, is not clear. So in Valorant you have a little more aspects, I would say. I'm not saying that one is more difficult than another necessarily, but I would say that in Valorant is because of the nature of the game, as you said, you have agents, you have different skills. There are some pictures when you see, it's like memes, right? When you see the bomb site with, you have the ult from Astra, you have neon walls, you have ultimate from Brimstones, you have like walls from Sage, and wow, what's happening here? And another thing is that on Valorant, you have much more, let's say, vertical way of looking at the game, not only horizontal. Because on CS:GO we see that when you talk about the site, they usually talk more about this horizontal way of looking. And in Valorant, you can be in a bomb site, and then suddenly Raze or Jet can go above you, and then another person can be down. The dog of Sky can go for you. So you need to be also, let's say, more aware of more things happening. And we usually try to optimize this, avoiding multitasking outside the server to begin, because we are becoming the masters of distraction. For you to have an idea, we receiving, and it's important for everybody watching here. It doesn't matter if you are in esports or not, but it's something that it's hitting on all of us because for us right now we have a range of focused attention of only 40 seconds. So it means that for some players right now it's really more difficult, for example, to just keep the aim happening for taking off this, and that's why lots of timing happens in FPS, because some players they are too much anxious, so they have the opportunity to just play on time, to just be careful, and sometimes they just cannot. They're really agitated in this generation that everything happens fast. So we try to avoid the guys to, for example, be in the practice room or in the training session during the map. For example, it's prohibited that they will have the mobile on the table, because only the presence of the mobile, you don't need even to use it. There are some now newer studies that shows that only the presence of the mobile on the table can already make you have lower levels of concentration, because subconsciously your brain will be thinking about checking the fear of missing out something. So we usually try to avoid multitasking outside of the context of the guys, like not overusing the computer before the distractions in the table, and the communication needs to be clear for you to have a picture of what's happening in the game. And during the game, we also try to make a really division. We call it like protocols. So we have protocols of communication. For example, we know exactly how we are going to communicate in the freeze time to have a good efficacy in the freeze time. We know exactly how are our rules of communication during the after plant or a retake. We have our protocols that we usually talk. For example, one of our protocols, I always say it's like nickname, when, and how, and when. So what it means that Naim, flash for me now, or Naim, in the next after plant, I need you to communicate where you are holding your aim. Because lots of the players they say, guys, we cannot do this in the after plant. We need to communicate better. Okay, but then if you're not specific, you are not efficient correcting the mistake for the next round. So we create usually lots of protocols to avoid the multitasking, that we don't need to overthink what's happening. We know that everybody clearly knows what to do, when to do, how to react. Of course, that we need to have a room for improvisation, but we try to work on how to avoid this. And in Valorant, I would say that this is the biggest difference, because of the nature of the game, you can have much more things that can distract you. And sometimes if you in your team also the communication is bad, or you are not like with those protocols, it can be even more challenge for the multitasking. And I would say that this is the main difference, not necessarily saying that one is more difficult than another, but in Valorant I focus on this to try to avoid to the guys, and we try to put our concentration higher. It's more challenging sometimes.
Okay. Wow, Bruno. This is like this is a lot to take in, obviously, a lot of information given there, but yeah, very well explained. I smiled when you started talking about, the how to give orders, or like protocols, right, to communicate, because all I had in my head was how I all of a sudden it just thoughts came into my head, how I play Valorant from time to time with my friend, and the way we communicate is just so inefficient. You just made me realize it's so bad that now I'm gonna make him watch this video so that we improve that, because this is very valuable advice, even for people like myself who are not necessarily professionals, but who do indulge in playing the occasional competitive game, and be tryhards, because that's what I am sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, it is what it is, right? Yeah. Okay, Bruno, so now I wanted to kind of touch upon Loud in specific. So obviously, congratulations are in order. It's a massive achievement to do what you have done with Loud this year in Istanbul, in Turkey. I saw your picture lifting the trophy on the stage. Must have felt phenomenal, I'm sure. So Bruno, how long have you been working with Loud, and before that monumental victory in Turkey?
Well, right now we are still assimilating everything that happened.
Okay.
It's true when people say that, wow, did you still realize what you just happened, what you just did? And sometimes it take a while. I have here, I can show you even for a moment the Radiant medal, that it's better than a medal in my opinion. And I was really grateful that I received one of these that was only 7, and it was just for the champion. And when I
Wow.
look at this sometimes here in my house, and I think, wow, it was really awesome what we did. And working with the boys was amazing because we I implemented with them one kind of mentality that we say as a progressive mentality. When you talk about mindset, mindset is a really used word now, but sometimes people don't understand quite well because unfortunately, yes, some experts, like they say on the internet, they talk about mindset all the time, but not in appropriate manner. Because when you say mindset, you need to think about the works of the laboratory of Carol Dweck that we divided in two types of mindset: fixed mindset and growth mindset. And one of the most important aspects of growth mindset is how you handle failure, how you look at your career in the process of the journey, and how you evolve. Not in like the fixed mindset that you are pressured by the results and you think that the results will tell you who you are. And talking about one of the things that I do with the boys is always choosing and helping us to go for the growth mindset. And I give them several examples from traditional sports, guys like Rafael Nadal, Michael Jordan, Phelps, how they talk about the process of evolving, the opportunities to grow. I like to talk about Daigo Mehara on Street Fighter player that he's one of the greatest on esports. He has a really good book. It's called The Will to Keep Winning. And he has obviously a growth mindset where he says even that it doesn't matter if it's a defeat or a victory, both are important for him because his goal is to grow up. So in both of them, he has like opportunities to study and grow. It's a work in process, our career. And when we implement those lens, I call them lens because it's how you see, how you look at the perspective of the championships. You know, in one of our first meetings with the boys in our boot camp in Madrid, I said exactly this: like, we have one championship that is one um, specific, is a fact. So everybody is looking for the same fact from a different perspective. Some people they want to prove themselves. Some people they are passionate. They feel the pressure to show what they are. Some people they come here threatened by this organization. If they don't show result, they are out. Some people they are like underdogs. Some people, so it's how you look at this. And I want us to look at this in a way that we work the championship progressively. Like we are not facing all the championship. One of the mistakes that people do is like they think about as a championship as a whole. So they think how many teams are there, how many things is happening, and there's social media and everything. So we tried to create our intern bubble that we were reinforcing ourselves in a really good way. We were facing every day as a different day, as a different chapter, as a different story, and we were aiming not to win necessarily the championship, but to win our next opponent. And when we saw we were growing and growing and thinking this way, we arrived to the finals, and it was much more light for them. And there is one interview that one of our youngest player, Les, he gave for Brazilian Riot that showed this, and it even surprised some people. They were commenting his interview because when they asked if he was feeling pressure by the championship, he said, "Oh, instead of feeling pressure, I chose to feel joy." Because look at this wonderful journey. I'm in Turkey. I'm able to do this with esports, and I'm able to know so good people to try to give my best, and with together with my another teammates, we can try to make this like really wonderful journey, giving our best every single game. So we are facing the chapters of the championship, trying to give our best, and most of all, enjoy the process. And I said this is really important because lots of the players, when they start playing video game professionally, they lose the joy and they take this as an obligation. And if you go for this path, the competitive side will be really tough for you. So working with the boys was really nice because they really bought into this idea. And we were facing the championship as a really incredible adventure that we were working progressively and not thinking about the whole opponents, but our next opponent. So now we have Zeta. And then, okay, who are we going to face now? We are going to face DRX or Optki or Leviathan, whatever. So the championship was much more, let's say, progressive, have more smooth. wrote for us in this way, and I think that it helped lots of the fact that they were really open it for the psychology and to applying even on the stage. Lots of those techniques that I told them, our communication, our reset between rounds was also used at every round. Our pause protocols for tactical and mental reset were used all the championship. So it was really incredible. I was also able to hear their communication during the game because Riot gives a really good structure for the staff. So I was participating between the maps. So I hope that I answered you about this more insight. How was the mentality of the boys, and also the feeling of being a champion makes everything worth. And it was incredible to lift that trophy, to hug the boys, and to finally realize, or still be in the process of realize, that we made history, the first Brazilian team to win a Riot tournament. So it was
Okay.
incredible.
You definitely answered my question, and even went beyond that. And what I can simply deduce from what you've just said is that the journey is more important than the goal, right? That the end result,
Definitely.
right? So
The goal is a consequence.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So that's fantastic to hear that, we should, from a psychologist as yourself, that we should definitely focus on taking things slow, one step at a time, and, enjoying that process rather than, just being fixated on that one goal that we have. So that's great. Yeah, so Bruno, you've highlighted, those what you've implemented into the team and everything, and how that looked like. But were there any perhaps hurdles that you and the team had to overcome on that process of implementing everything that you wanted to implement at Loud? Were there any things that were difficult, any difficulties or hurdles that you had to overcome, basically?
yes. I would say, Nain, that the main difficulty that I faced, that I had in the beginning, was the fact that I didn't work with the boys in the long term. I was called for working with them, especially during the champions. Why? Because they were already working with some another psychologist, and he was making a really good job with them during the beginning of the year. But this person changed their whole in the organization and became the manager, the head manager, and they were looking for another psychologist. And because I was working with Sasi, Sadak, and BZK before, and the last champions. And during the last season, actually, we made a really good season in the first year of Valorant in Brazil with a team called the Team Vikings. And we were Brazilian champions 2 times. We were in all Masters and in the first champions. That it was a really crazy champions, by the way. And we also had the opportunity there to almost surprise the world. It was a really bittersweet flavor from that championship because from the 16 teams, they said that we were the last one in the list, and Gambit was the first. And we faced Gambit, and we were 1-1. We were to the decider map, and we were 12-5, 12-6. And unfortunately, we allowed them to make the comeback. And I remember that after that day, we spoke as a team and we took lots of learning. I'm telling you exactly like how you can learn in the process, not to just go on Twitter, say, I will come back stronger, and you don't do anything different in the next day. I call this like Twitter reset. It's most of the players, they just do this honestly. They just go and say that they will come back stronger, and they don't even analyze their POV in the next game. They don't even analyze the VOD. They don't analyze anything, their behavior, their communication, how they made the pregame routine. So we did this. We analyzed what we could learn, and that it's not what happened there, but what we would do with what happened. And it was really beautiful to see that in these champions now, we were able to do the opposite. We, for example, against Leviathan, we were losing 12-6, and we made the comeback. Not only in that game, but in several other games. So with the guys, the main difficulty was that I needed to implement some of my methodology, let's say more in a hurry, more in close to the championship, because I was caught really in a surprise. They called me, BZK said, Bruno, I really need you there because We need a psychologist, and I think that you are definitely the right person because we already know my captain, you already know one of the star players in the team, and I believe that all those three and other guys they will also enjoy working with you. And please, let's go. And I needed to adapt my agenda because it was totally in a hurry. I was in the middle of this road for the major with CSGO, in Zero Zero Nation, some other projects, but I thought that would be definitely a really nice opportunity to share this journey with the boys. And I saw a lot of potential for us to be the champions. And from the beginning, this me and BZK we were talking that we could do this. So it was an important part that he also was really open for the psychology. So he gave me all space time needed with the guys for the sessions, even if we needed to change sometimes one time that we would play a map or do some tactics to make some implementation of some techniques, some conversation with the boys. So I had the time that I needed. We could like create our own reality with the championship. But yeah, definitely the most challenging was that I needed to let's say change the wheels of the car with the car in movement. And I believe that I did well with this, but it was what was like the most challenging part for me, I would say.
I can definitely say that you've probably done a very good job since you were one of the people on the stage lifting the trophy. So I don't doubt that for a second, Bruno. I don't doubt that at all. But yeah, okay. So right, that answers my question perfectly. So fantastic. Okay, Bruno. Just I just have two questions just to close it out now.
Right.
How good are you at FPS games?
Mm. I was better before. Now I would say that because I play much more less now
Mm-hmm.
I that I wanted. I still play, let's say, every day, one map or two maps, both in Valorant, CSGO. Now I want to test Overwatch too because everybody's saying that it's really fun. I played the Overwatch one and I also want to test. I love RPG games as well, like The Witcher, Mass Effect, and those games. But now, if it's about my talent, I prefer to leave for the players because I would say that I am a mid talented now. I usually stay in the mid ranks, like all the time I stay between gold, platinum, those ranks. Right now, I aim to go higher, but I leave the skill part for the players, and I just try to have fun playing because I already take the sports like as a profession. So when I open my game to play, I usually just try to have my friends, my girlfriend that also plays lots of FPS, and we just try to have fun. And I try to leave the skill part for the boys because they are much more better than me.
Yeah, let's just focus on what we do best and have fun with the rest,
Yeah,
right? So yeah, very well
yeah.
put.
I have my
Um,
moments in my Twitter. I post some highlights. If you guys go Bruno Garcia PC on Twitter and you put like their media, you see some of my highlights on CS:GO and all. But like I said, I prefer to leave the highlights and the skill part for the guys.
yeah, exactly. Okay, Bruno, what are your plans for 2023 for next year? With especially focused on Valorant because with Loud and everything. If you can share with us, will you be joining another org? Will you be staying with Loud? Whatever you can say, then I'd be interested to know, and the people will be interested to know that as well, for sure.
All right. Well, right now it's really, let's say, confusing moment for the whole scene of Valorant.
Yeah.
Since Riot announced that until the middle of October, we would need to send the names, like now the franchise thing. So the players, the staff, some of the negotiations around the world, they were made more in a hurry, I would say. People were more stressed during these negotiations. Um, but talking about myself, I still want to keep my work with Loud, and we are almost like saying the last details about this. I was contacted by some another organizations and all, but my main goal is to keep the working loud. I want to make this happen, and I think that it would be fine. We're just like I said, because it's different right now with the whole thing of the franchise, the type of negotiations that you have. moving to LA or not, or making specific jobs like going during some periods, because I live in Europe and I was working with the guys also in person, but also a huge part of my work is also remote. I go for boot camps and championships depending on the work. So we are trying to figure out the best model, the best format for working, and also finishing some details in the conversations. But so far, the conversations with Loud are going really well. I cannot officially say that we have something closed yet. I also received some other proposals that I was talking, hearing, but in the moment, my goal is to keep working with the boys because I have really, really huge respect for what we did. It was really important for me also. Sadak as a IGL is a guy that I really enjoy working with. His mentality, how he also is really open for the psychology. So definitely my plans and Valorant for 2023 is like creating more content, help another psychologists that they are entering the area, develop the psychology in Brazil also and also in the whole the world. And definitely still go in the franchise with the strong team. I hope with Loud. We are just finishing some details, as I said, and enjoy the first championship in Brazil. That it will be really insane, and I cannot wait for it.
I'm sure you were ecstatic to hear about the play-in tournament in kickoff tournament in Brazil next
Yeah.
year. So yeah, no wonder that you wanna stick with Loud, and after all that you've achieved with the team, it's just no surprise that you still want to be part of that team in particular. So yeah, that's fantastic, Bruno. All right, Bruno. It's been just a sheer pleasure to talk with you today, to have you on, for you to share with anyone watching this video, how your side of the job looks like, why it's important for esports to hire people such as yourself, and just how much work you are actually putting in to teams, and how involved a clinical psychologist in esports actually is. It's not just a person sitting in an office. It's just working non-stop. So that's something that I definitely personally will take away from the conversation we had today. So thank you very much for that. And Bruno, I just wish you all the best in the future. I hope that you keep working with a partner team in 2023, and just wish you more trophies in the future, Bruno.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here, sharing a little bit about the psychology. Like I said, it's an area that is growing up so much. As you mentioned, it's really important to say when you said about clinical psychologists, just highlighting that it's sports psychology, because when you say about clinical psychology, some people maybe they can have the idea that I work with the boys sometimes with also in the clinical aspects, and it's important to clarify Naim, to the community also. Some people ask me this, Bruno, you work with the guys if the guy has, for example, individual, personal, psychological aspect to work. We don't do this. We can like receive the demand. We of course help in the beginning. We hear a personal thing, a problem with the family, something more individual from this personal life of the player. We can like receive this with care and respect, and then we recommend this person to go to a clinical psychologist and to their individual clinical psychologist. For example, I will not say the name of some players because some of them they are in during the process of therapy, and they prefer to keep to themselves. But there is one player that is I don't have any problem to say because he posts about the importance of his mental health care. That is Sassi. He has his own clinical psychologist that work with him during like 2 times per week in online in person sessions also, and then working this more like personal things that he's like with family, girlfriend, now wife, and then also maybe the professional part. And really do recommend that some of the players that they are professionally now working, if they want, they have the moments to this mental hygiene, to work with their mental part in a more personal way because it's a lot of to do. And as an esports psychologist, I work with them to try to manage those emotions and their career in the most appropriated way. But we are all humans, and sometimes specific players maybe he or she require also a visit to a clinical psychologist to work of some demands, personal demands that can affect their professional also career. But like I said, it was just to clarify that point because it's really
Yeah.
important. And well, it was really a pleasure to be here, and I can come back also anytime, sharing with the community about my work, my passion, and be able to talk a little bit about the psychology and how it's growing. It's always for me a good opportunity. So thank you so much also for the interview.
My absolute pleasure, Bruno. Thank you so much. And again, from the bottom of my heart and from Run It Back, we wish you all the best in 2023. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to talk to you again in the future. Thank you so much, Bruno. Take care.
Thank you.